This is the same Nature Human Behavior op-ed published, I can't remember, just a few days ago, I think, in which science must respect the dignity and rights of all humans, is the title. Subtitle, New Ethics Guidance addresses potential harms for human population groups who do not participate in research but may be harmed by its publication. Very first sentence is, although academic freedom is fundamental, it is not unbounded. Just a few. I recommend that you read this whole thing, but let me just read the things I've highlighted and let's talk about them. There is a fine balance between academic freedom and the protection of the dignity and rights of individuals and human groups. They attest. Probably true, but so you don't have to write anything down. You can respond to that.
Well, I just wanted to point out that initial assertion.
Not academic freedom is fundamental.
It's fundamental,
but not unbounded.
But it's not unbounded.
Freedom is not unbounded.
Right. That sounds so reasonable, and yet it ought to immediately set off alarm bells about what exactly they are about to steal from you in terms of rights that you had before that you don't have now. And really,
at least they don't bury the lead.
Right.
It's a little cryptic, but they don't bury it. It's right there.
Well, they don't bury it, but cryptic is the point, because really, I don't know. At the point I read a sentence like that, I don't know if I need to immediately stand up and object and say, that's where the bodies are going to be buried, or if they're going to say something mundane like, you're not allowed to murder people in your laboratory. Academic freedom is fundamental, but it's not unbounded. You can't murder people in your laboratory. Right. Well, I agree,
Yes.
But does that mean there are things I can't say? Does it mean that there
turns out, yes.
True things I can't say? In which case, that's where the goddamn the bodies are buried.
Yes, that's exactly right. Okay, so again, I agree. Okay, this is where the fact of Adobe being a little obnoxious. There we go. Okay. Harms can arise as a direct result of the conduct of research. Sure, of course. Harms can also arise indirectly. You can show my screen if you like, Zach. Harms can also arise indirectly as a result of the publication of a research project or a piece of scholarly communication. For instance, stigmatization of a vulnerable human group or potential use of the results of research for unintended purposes, e.g. public policies that undermine human rights or misuse of information to threaten public health. That's an extraordinary half a paragraph as well. They're now claiming that if someone abuses the research that you have done, you are in some ways accountable for their abuse of your findings. Therefore, that is going to be their justification, implicitly mostly here, but partially explicitly. That is going to be their justification for, therefore, we're going to save you from yourself here. We're going to save you from doing any research which could possibly be misunderstood in any way by any nefarious actors, which of course means that's the end of research. That's it. We're done. It's over.
Imagine the following, right? Imagine a periodic table in which nitrogen has to be removed because knowledge about nitrogen is indeed prone to misuse.
It is.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
That stuff is explosive. And you see what I'm saying? Sodium also. Get rid of that one.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, what are they even talking about?
I see a very rapid shrinking of the periodic table given this logic.
Yeah, there's not going to be much left
not
on
much
the.
left.
Yeah, it's hard to find an element that you couldn't abuse.
An innocent element. There are none.
Yeah.
No. If innocence means not only are you not guilty of harm, but you are not guilty of having been misunderstood to be guilty of harm.
Yes, I guess some of the transuranics are so vanishingly rare and last for such a tiny fraction of a second that maybe they are beyond abuse.
Is that what they're called? Transuranics?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, there it is.
I didn't know that.
Learn something
This is
every
just like
3
just
weeks.
right above, just slightly larger than uranium?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But anyway, yeah, the periodic table is pretty much a goner. There are maybe a few elements that we can keep, but most of them are going to be gone. But imagine
whoever used it anyway.
I'm not going to start naming names. I'm certainly not going to try to spell them. But in any case,
I'm sure Mendeleev was a racist or something.
Well, a lot of people had a lot of defects, and a lot of other people have used their work. And the problem is the two universes, a universe downstream of that paragraph.
Yeah.
That is, let's put it this way, this term will become important again on DarkHorse soon, but that is the fast track to a dark age.
Yes.
If you are not allowed to study things that could be abused by others, right? I mean, that is a completely unscientific universe. There is no science in that universe, right? Because who even knows? Are you allowed to study things that you don't know if they could be abused until your work is done? Well, you probably can't do that work either for the same reason.
Well, but it also completely puts all the power in the hands of anyone who wants to abuse anything. I mean, this, Darwinism has been suffering this fate basically since Darwin, where the so-called social Darwinists who, stole the word and now forever after, as evolutionary biologists who are actually trying to do good work, are accused of being eugenicists and racists and Nazis and all this. It's like, that was an abuse of Darwinism. And I write about this actually in my fraud piece in Natural Selections this week. Like, the fact that someone used the word Darwinism and fundamentally misunderstood what the guy was on about isn't on us. Isn't on the evolutionary biologists. Just as the fact that some research could be abused by some, idiot or asshole, actually is not the responsibility of the person doing the research. It's not.
It's not the responsibility of the person doing the research. And here you have a journal in the family of journals that is one of the premier outlets for science in the world that has declared, if that paragraph stands, they have declared war on the idea of science. And you're right, the extrapolation, the paragraph, if it was applied fairly, ends science completely.
Sure.
What it will do instead is exactly what you point to, which is it will give the power to define what science is tolerated.
Yes.
It will leave that completely arbitrary power in the hands of those awful enough to wish to utilize that weapon. So only the stuff, the abuses they want will proceed, and the abuses the legitimate uses will not.
That's right. Okay, another choice.
Another paragraph.
Another two paragraphs in this case. And it's not a long op-ed. I could have just highlighted the whole thing. But here we go. You may show my screen if you like, Zach. Regardless of content type, research, review, or opinion, and for research, regardless of whether a research project was reviewed and approved by an appropriate institutional ethics committee, editors reserve the right to request modifications to or correct or otherwise amend post-publication, and in severe cases refuse publication of or retract post-publication, : I'm going to keep reading here, but I don't care what is about to happen. As it turns out, it's bad, but I don't care what's about to happen. Editors reserve the right to amend post-publication?
They're
What? Like, you submit your precious research to a journal, and it goes through peer review, and it goes through edits and edits and edits and edits, and it's published. And the editors of this journal are saying, actually, we might change what it says that you said after it's published. That's insane. Let me read the next paragraph here. And there's 4 points that they make. I'm just going to read the first one. So the reasons by which they may, for instance, just change afterwards what they already published of yours includes content that is premised upon the assumption of inherent biological, social, or cultural superiority or inferiority of one human group over another based on race, ethnicity, national or social origin, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, religion, political or other beliefs, age, disease, disability, or other socially constructed or socially relevant groupings hereafter referred to as socially constructed or socially relevant human groupings. Now, there's a lot there, obviously. Let's just pick the low-hanging fruit. The low-hanging fruit, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit here, but one of them is content that is, I'm just going to skip to content that is premised upon the assumption of social or cultural superiority or inferiority based on sex. Okay. Women are better than men at seeing the details of situations, and men are better than women at seeing the gist. I have talked about this before. I have the paper on which that conclusion is based, and it's a sort of a forest for the trees and trees for the forest question. This holds across a number of domains, and It is also true, for instance, that on average, women are better than men in linguistic tasks, and on average, men are better than women in strictly mathematical tasks. That's not to say that the best living mathematician might not be a man, or the best living author might not be, rather, that the best living mathematician might not be a woman, or that the best living author might not be a man. I am talking about average differences between groups. This is what we do. Okay, and some of what they're trying to do here is say your categories are wrong, your categories are lies. And some of the categories that science has used and that people have used in the past have been lies, have been wrong, are based on stereotypes that do not hold water. But just to go after the low-hanging fruit here, sex, again, is real, is not a creation of the Victorian era scientists. It is in fact real, and on average there are differences between us that are actually biological, social, and cultural, all of those things. And the cultural and social differences will vary somewhat across, guess what, culture. And the idea that we cannot talk about that and cannot do research into that, well, once again, end of science. And furthermore, and then I'll let you talk, like, what's this journal called? Nature Human Behavior. Like, that's the journal in which they say you cannot talk about biological, social, or cultural differences. Or you're allowed to talk about differences as long as you claim, but it's all equally good no matter what. We're all equally awesome. We all get gold stars on our foreheads, and we can all go over there and sit in the corner and frickin' cry because we no longer have any reason to aspire to anything because we all think we're equally good as everyone else, and therefore, what's the point anyway? I mean, it also takes away the desire to actually aspire to things, to imagine that you're equally good as everyone else already is, and that's it, you're done.
So you have the editors at a premier outlet reserving the right to alter your work after it comes in or prevent the work from being
after
published.
It's published.
Right?
Yes.
But the point is, people who are not in academia will not understand the power of a top journal basically saying what conclusions it's willing to publish, not on the basis that other conclusions may not be right, but on the basis that other conclusions could be abused, right? What they are doing is they're saying, here are the conclusions that are acceptable here. Mm-hmm. Now, imagine, what does that mean over at, whatever the proper subjournal of Nature is where climate science happens? Mm-hmm. Do they also have a policy that only science that pushes in the direction of policy modifications in which we address climate change will be published? And in which case, on what basis do we say things like X% of scientists in climate science agree if the point is, well, there's this force that says basically you're not going to get very far in climate science if you don't agree, right? It becomes circular. Yes. And so in a circular world, where you cannot talk about the superiority of men or women at different tasks where men and women are differently capable. Right. What happens is you will then, over time, produce the phony scientific impression of similarity, mm-hmm. which will then be used to counter the argument. So basically, this is a positive feedback. Anybody who wishes to say, no, actually, men and women are different, they have different capabilities, and we know that, the evidence is clear. Well, the evidence actually, yes, the evidence used to be clear, but it has become increasingly clear that men and women are not different. Why? Because of editorial overreach at the journals.
Actually, and I had something else to say here, but that reminds me of the next two little things that I wanted to read from this, where they have working definitions adopted or adapted from the Sager guidelines and other sources. I don't remember what. Sager is sex and gender equity in research. I didn't go down that rabbit hole. I'm sure it's ugly. Sex refers to currently understood biological differences. Gender refers to socially constructed and enacted roles and behaviors which occur in a historical and cultural context and vary across societies over time. Sex, well, we currently understand this, but we all know that things change. Gender, though, is this thing. So they've got that reversed again. Sex has been around for, not very many billion of years. And gender is the downstream effects of sex on your behavior, and lots of organisms have gender, and this gender identity crap that is now taking over is a totally made-up 21st century thing that has no bearing on anyone outside of, well, the entire planet and it's how we're going to dissolve. Because we've all... I'm done. I'm done.
All right.
Like, oh my God.